January 7th, 2026, 4:17 a.m. local time, approximately 400 nautical miles southwest of Iceland in the frigid North Atlantic. American forces executed a seizure that brought two nuclear superpowers closer to direct confrontation than any moment since the Cold War. The target was a rusting 24-year-old oil tanker that had become the most tracked vessel on Earth. This ship had fled American forces once before and was now racing toward the Arctic Circle under Russian submarine escort. What happened in those waters sent an unmistakable message about American willingness to challenge anyone defying its authority. This is the complete story of how American forces hunted, tracked, and captured a vessel that Russia deployed submarines to protect. Before we dive in, why not hit subscribe and drop a like? It really helps out. All right, let's keep going. To understand this operation, you must first understand the shadow world of sanctioned oil shipping that emerged after the Ukraine war. Western nations cut Russia off from global shipping networks, refusing to carry Russian oil or insure vessels transporting it. So Moscow turned to what experts call the Dark Fleet, a global network of aging vessels operating outside international regulations. These ships are typically more than 15 years old, have no clear owner, fly no legitimate flag, and carry no insurance. More than 1,000 such vessels now operate worldwide, ferrying sanctioned oil from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela to willing buyers. For Moscow, this dark fleet keeps oil revenue flowing despite crippling Western sanctions that would otherwise devastate the economy. For Washington, these same ships represent leverage against rivals, making them high-priority targets for American enforcement operations. In December 2025, the Trump administration imposed a partial blockade on Venezuela, banning sanctioned tankers from the region entirely. Any sanctioned vessel approaching Venezuelan waters would be seized by American forces patrolling under Operation Southern Spear. Since mid-December, Venezuela had been unable to export oil, leaving millions of barrels stranded in storage and aboard ships. Within weeks, American forces had already seized two sanctioned tankers attempting to load Venezuelan crude, the Skipper and the Centuries. But a third ship eluded them, a vessel called the Bella One that would become the target of an international manhunt. On December 14, 2025, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter spotted the Bella One approximately 80 nautical miles north of Venezuela. The ship was flying the flag of Guyana, a registry popular among vessels seeking to avoid international scrutiny. The Coast Guard ordered the Bella One to heave to and prepare for boarding, but the captain refused to comply. Instead, the tanker accelerated and turned directly toward Venezuelan territorial waters where American forces could not legally pursue. Coast Guard personnel attempted to board using small boats, but the crew maneuvered aggressively and refused to lower ladders. Within hours, the Bella One crossed into Venezuelan waters, representing a rare and embarrassing defeat for American maritime forces. After escaping, the Bella One disappeared from tracking systems, its automatic identification system transponder going completely dark. Intelligence analysts pieced together movements using satellite imagery, locating the vessel docked at a Venezuelan port facility. Commercial satellites captured work crews painting over hull markings and installing new identification numbers on the tanker. When the vessel departed in late December, it was no longer the Bella One, but had been completely transformed. The crew had painted a Russian flag on its side and renamed the vessel from Bella One to Marinara. This transformation was critical because suddenly this stateless ship had become Russian property with Moscow's full protection. On December 28th, the newly christened Marinara departed Venezuelan waters and began transiting northeast across the Atlantic Ocean. Marine tracking experts determined it was headed toward Murmansk, Russia's largest city north of the Arctic Circle. The route would take the Marinara through the Gyuk Gap, the strategic choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Within days, American P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft began tracking the vessel's progress across the open ocean. Flying from bases in the Azores, United Kingdom, and Iceland, these aircraft maintained near-continuous coverage of the tanker. The crews documented everything: speed, course changes, communications emissions, and critically, other vessels appearing in proximity. Because the Marinara was not traveling alone, and what American surveillance detected would escalate this into superpower confrontation. As the Marinara crossed the mid-Atlantic, Russia deployed military assets to escort the vessel safely to Murmansk. American intelligence detected at least 2 Russian surface combatants operating in unusual proximity to the tanker's track. More alarming was detection of a Russian submarine shadowing the vessel, confirmed by sonar data from Allied monitoring assets. This unprecedented naval investment to protect a single tanker raised immediate questions about what Russia was truly guarding. The ship was reportedly empty, carrying no oil, which made Moscow's aggressive response even more puzzling to analysts. Perhaps the vessel contained sensitive equipment or documents that Maduro's government had tried to evacuate before capture. Russia formally warned the United States against seizing the vessel, but Washington made clear it would proceed regardless. The Trump administration faced a complex question. Could they legally seize a vessel now flying the Russian flag? The administration decided to treat the Marinara as stateless, rejecting the legitimacy of its Russian registration entirely. Officials argued the reflagging was a transparent fraud designed to evade law enforcement, not a legitimate nationality change. Under international maritime law, stateless vessels can be boarded and seized by any nation without diplomatic complications. A Pentagon statement declared the seizure would support President Trump's proclamation targeting vessels threatening Western Hemisphere security. The operation required precise coordination between the Department of Homeland Security, Coast Guard, and U.S. Navy forces. Coast Guard maritime security response teams would conduct the boarding elite units trained for hostile vessel seizures. The Navy provided protective cover, positioning destroyers and cruisers with Aegis systems to deter any Russian interference. Attack submarines monitored Russian submarine activity, ready to intervene if Moscow's underwater forces attempted to interfere. Carrier-based aircraft from the USS Gerald R. Ford maintained combat air patrols within striking distance of the operation. The Ford had repositioned north following Operation Absolute Resolve, which had captured Maduro just days earlier. On January 6th, as the Marinara approached Iceland, American forces began their final approach under cover of darkness. The Coast Guard cutter Bertholf closed to radar range, carrying a full maritime security response team and helicopter. At 4:17 a.m. on January 7th, the Bertholf emerged from darkness and ordered the Marinara to heave to. The captain responded that his vessel was Russian-flagged in international waters and demanded American forces stand down immediately. The American commander replied the vessel was being treated as stateless and the boarding would proceed regardless of objections. Within minutes, an MH-65 Dolphin helicopter launched carrying the first wave of the Maritime Security Response Team. Simultaneously, Coast Guard small boats raced toward the hull, creating multiple boarding points the crew could not defend. Russian naval vessels transmitted urgent communications and tracked the Americans with radar, but their weapons remained silent. Russian commanders apparently concluded that protecting this tanker was not worth risking direct combat with American forces. Operators fast-roped onto the deck from the helicopter and immediately began securing the bridge and engineering spaces. The crew offered only passive resistance, refusing to cooperate but not physically opposing the boarding team's movements. Within 47 minutes, the team commander reported the Marinara was secure and fully under American control. The Russian flag was lowered and replaced with the Stars and Stripes, a moment broadcast to audiences worldwide. With the Marinara secured, investigators began the process of documenting everything aboard the captured vessel. The cargo holds were confirmed empty, proving the ship carried no oil despite all the effort to protect it. The vessel's records had been largely destroyed, with logbooks and manifests either missing or deliberately damaged beyond recovery. This destruction suggested the crew had orders to eliminate evidence during the Atlantic crossing to protect their handlers. The tanker's captain, a Russian national, was arrested for violating American sanctions and resisting law enforcement officers. Russian state media confirmed the seizure, acknowledging that Moscow's explicit warnings had been completely ignored by Washington. The Foreign Ministry condemned what it called an act of piracy demanding immediate release of the ship and crew. The Trump administration rejected Russian protests, calling the registration a transparent fraud designed to shield sanctions evasion. China responded with sharp condemnation, declaring America had brazenly resorted to force against Venezuela and its oil resources. Beijing called it a typical act of bullying and serious violation of international law infringing on Venezuelan sovereignty. Most oil stranded by America's blockade had been destined for Chinese refineries, making Beijing a direct victim of enforcement. Trump announced that Venezuela would surrender 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States government. That oil was worth approximately $2 billion at current market prices, a massive windfall from the captured nation. Trump declared he would personally control the proceeds as president to benefit both Venezuela and the United States. Whether Venezuela was selling this oil voluntarily or America was simply seizing it remained entirely unclear to observers. The administration demanded Venezuela sever all economic ties with Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran to resume exports. Washington insisted any future Venezuelan oil development must occur exclusively in partnership with American companies going forward. Trump announced meetings with Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and ExxonMobil executives to discuss opportunities in post-Maduro Venezuela. Interim President Delcy Rodriguez faced an impossible situation, needing to appear defiant without provoking another American strike. She pushed back against Trump's claims, insisting no external power was running Venezuela or controlling its government. Rodriguez declared that the Venezuelan government rules the country alone, rejecting any suggestion of outside control. When asked about American threats against her personally, she offered a response mixing defiance with careful restraint. She said her destiny was not decided by them but only by God, showing strength while avoiding direct provocation. The seizure proved American surveillance could track any vessel anywhere on Earth and pursue targets across oceans. It also revealed the limits of Russian power projection, unable or unwilling to stop America from taking what it wanted. For all the submarines and warships deployed, Russia could not prevent American forces from seizing a vessel under its flag. Military analyst Cedric Layton called it a sophisticated operation involving Navy, Coast Guard, and possibly special operations assets. Global affairs analyst Kim Dozier warned there would be payback down the line that Washington was not yet calculating. Representative Raja Krishnamurthy noted that while America has enforcement rights, nobody wants open hostilities with Russia. The Marinara was ordered to turn south toward an American port, away from Russian waters and Moscow's reach. The hunt had lasted 24 days and spanned thousands of miles, bringing nuclear-armed navies into direct proximity. In those cold North Atlantic waters where the Marinara was seized, a new chapter in superpower competition had unmistakably begun. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.